Hey there. Welcome back to the Ghastly Journal. I'm Alex, and today I'm going to tell you about something that happened to me last year, something I still can't fully explain. It all started with an email. I'd been searching for a place in the countryside for months, somewhere quiet where I could write my next book. The real estate market was brutal, and every decent property was snatched up almost immediately or priced way beyond my budget. Then, one rainy Tuesday afternoon, I received a notification about a new listing. Historic Victorian home, price to sell, immediate possession available. The price was suspiciously low for a 5-bedroom Victorian with 10 acres of land. The listing had only been up for 20 minutes, but I called the agent immediately. A woman with a clipped professional voice answered. When I expressed interest in viewing the property, there was a pause, followed by, "The Maddox Estate is a unique opportunity, but I should inform you that it's being sold as is, and the family is eager to complete the sale quickly." I asked why. "The last family member passed recently," she said. "The heirs live overseas and have no interest in maintaining the property." It sounded perfect. Too perfect, really. I scheduled a viewing for the next day. The house was about 2 hours outside the city, nestled in a valley that time seemed to have forgotten. As I drove down the long gravel driveway, the trees parted to reveal a grand Victorian home that looked like it belonged on the cover of a Gothic novel. 3 stories of weathered grandeur, with a wraparound porch and intricate woodwork that you just don't see anymore. The real estate agent was already there, a slim woman in her 50s with silver-streaked hair pulled back in a tight bun. She introduced herself as Margaret Keller. As we walked toward the house, I noticed how she kept a careful distance from the property, standing at the edge of the driveway while gesturing for me to proceed up the steps. "Aren't you coming in?" I asked. She smiled tightly. "I've shown it 3 times this week. I know the layout well enough to guide you from here if you don't mind. I have a bit of a cold and would prefer to stay in the fresh air." It was odd, but I didn't question it. The opportunity to explore the house alone actually appealed to me. The moment I stepped inside, I was hit by the smell. Old wood, dust, and something else. Something earthy and almost sweet, like overripe fruit. The foyer opened into a grand hallway with a sweeping staircase. To the right was what must have been a parlor, and to the left a formal dining room. Both were empty except for a few pieces of heavy antique furniture draped with yellowed sheets. Through the agent's directions from outside, I explored the first floor. The kitchen with its ancient cast iron stove, a library with built-in shelves stripped of books, and a sunroom overlooking what must have once been a garden, now overgrown with weeds and wild roses. The second floor held 5 bedrooms, each with high ceilings and large windows. In what was clearly the master bedroom, a massive 4-poster bed remained, the only piece of furniture not covered or removed. On the 3rd floor were 2 smaller rooms, servants' quarters probably, and access to an attic I didn't explore. Throughout the tour, I felt a growing sense of excitement. Yes, the place needed work, a lot of work, but the bones were good, the structure was sound, and most importantly, it felt right. I could already imagine myself writing at a desk by one of those tall windows, watching the seasons change across the valley. When I came back outside, Margaret was on her phone, but quickly ended the call when she saw me. "Well?" she asked, not moving any closer to the house. "I'll take it," I said, surprising even myself with the certainty in my voice. Something flickered across her face. Relief? Concern? But it was gone so quickly I thought I might have imagined it. "The Maddox heirs will be pleased," she said. "They're very motivated sellers. In fact, if you can close quickly, say within a week, I believe they would accept an offer even below the asking price." It was strange. Everything about this transaction felt rushed, as if the family couldn't get rid of the property fast enough, but I was too excited about the prospect of owning such a magnificent home at a bargain price to question it too deeply. The closing was remarkably smooth. I never met any of the Maddox's heirs. Everything was handled through their attorney, a nervous man named Philip Jenkins, who seemed perpetually checking his watch. When I asked about the property's history, hoping for some colorful anecdotes to share with future guests, he shuffled his papers and muttered something about the family having owned it for generations before quickly changing the subject. The only unusual moment came when I was signing the final paperwork. Jenkins slid a non-disclosure agreement across the table. "What's this?" I asked. "Standard procedure," he said, not meeting my eyes. "The family values their privacy. They simply request that you don't publicize any personal items or family documents you might find on the property." It seemed odd, but not unreasonable. I signed. 2 weeks later, I moved in. The first few days were busy with unpacking and arranging furniture. I set up my writing space in the library, bringing in a massive oak desk I'd found at an antique store. The house had no internet connection yet, and cell service was spotty at best, which I actually found refreshing. This was why I'd moved to the country after all, to disconnect, to focus on my writing without the constant distractions of modern life. On my 4th night in the house, I had my first strange experience. I was in bed reading when I heard what sounded like footsteps on the 3rd floor, directly above my bedroom. Slow, deliberate steps that crossed from one end of the attic to the other, then stopped. I froze, book in hand, listening. The house was old. It settled and creaked constantly, but these were unequivocally footsteps. I grabbed my phone and turned on the flashlight, then made my way upstairs. The steps to the 3rd floor were narrow and steep, designed for servants who were meant to be neither seen nor heard. At the top was a small landing with doors to what had once been servants' bedrooms and a pull-down ladder leading to the attic. The attic ladder was down. I was certain I hadn't left it that way. In fact, I hadn't been up to the attic at all since moving in. "Hello?" I called, shining my light up into the darkness. "Is someone there?" No response, but the silence felt heavy, expectant. I climbed the ladder slowly, my heart pounding. The attic was a large open space with sloped ceilings and small round windows at each end. My flashlight cut through the darkness, illuminating piles of what looked like old furniture, trunks, and boxes. There was no one there, of course, just decades of accumulated possessions, forgotten and gathering dust. As I turned to leave, my light caught something on the far wall. A door I hadn't noticed before, partially hidden behind a stack of old picture frames. It looked different from the other doors in the house, newer somehow, with a heavy padlock securing it. I made a mental note to find a way to open it, then headed back downstairs, attributing the footsteps to the house settling or my imagination working overtime in a new, unfamiliar space. The next morning, I decided to properly explore the grounds. The 10 acres included dense woods to the north and east, open meadows to the south, and a small overgrown orchard to the west. Behind the house was what had once been a formal garden, now wild and untamed, but still showing the ghost of its original design in the arrangement of stone paths and weathered statues. As I walked the perimeter of the property, I noticed something odd about the tree line at the northern edge. There was a gap, almost like a path leading deeper into the woods. Curious, I followed it.
You have come here not by accident. There is no accident in the psychic, silent pilgrimage. Something inside you, ancient and intuitive, has been pushing at the walls of your identity, urging you to question the mask you wear and the smiles you offer like sacrifices at an altar that has never blessed you in return. And so I ask you softly, but firmly, what becomes of the empath when they no longer bow before the idol of others' comfort? Let me tell you now, when the empath stops pleasing everyone, the archetype within them begins to awaken. Not the persona, the carefully crafted social garment tailored from childhood wounds and conditioned behaviors, but the raw, forgotten core, the self, The empath, you see, is often not born, but forged, molded not from light, but from necessity. A necessity to survive in an environment where feeling the room was safer than feeling oneself. This is the first rupture in the empath's illusion, realizing that their gift of sensitivity was not gifted, it was summoned. It was conjured unconsciously in response to danger. A child does not become empathic because the world celebrated their spirit, but because they had to intuit the unspoken in order to stay safe. So what the world praises in the empath, compassion, patience, intuition, is often merely the visible residue of their invisible wound. And that wound has a name. It is the wound of self-erasure. You see, for years, perhaps decades, the empath walks through life like a mirror without a frame, reflecting, absorbing, bending light for others. They become attuned to moods, to shifts in energy, to the tremble in someone's voice before they even speak. They develop the sixth sense, not because they are divine, though they often are, but because they were trained by trauma. When you grow up amidst emotional instability, you become fluent in the language of unspoken tension. You learn to detect storms in silence. You smile, you serve, you soothe, hoping that in doing so, love will remain. But love, true love, cannot be earned through sacrifice. And the moment the empath realizes this is the moment the truth begins to rise from the deep. At first it comes quietly, a strange unease when saying yes again, a fatigue that sleep cannot repair, a sensation of betrayal, though no one has betrayed them but themselves. Then the dreams begin. The psyche, no longer satisfied with the lie, stirs beneath consciousness and brings forth images. The empath, drowning in water, running through collapsing houses, being chased by a faceless crowd. These are not nightmares, they are messages. The house is the structure of your false self. The drowning is the loss of boundaries. The crowd is the multitude of identities you carried to keep others pleased. The unconscious speaks in symbols because it knows the soul does not awaken through logic. It awakens through recognition. So the empath begins to question, who am I when no one is looking? Who am I if I am not needed? What remains when I stop giving? This is where the pain begins, because the answer at first is silence, emptiness, a void. When one has spent their life constructing identity through pleasing others, the absence of that dynamic feels like death. And in a way it is. It is the death of the false self, the ego that believed love is earned only by erasure. But there is a secret I want to whisper to you now, a secret buried in the heart of shadow work. The void is not the end, it is the womb. The death you feel is not final, it is alchemical. The empath is being broken open, not to be destroyed, but to be reassembled by truth, to finally encounter the self. Not the socially rewarded mask, not the empathic performance, but the primordial you that existed before the need to be needed. This awakening begins with rage. Yes, rage, not compassion, not forgiveness, but unfiltered rage. Because when you stop pleasing everyone, you begin to see the exploitation. You see how your gentleness was manipulated, how your silence was interpreted as agreement, how your presence was demanded, but your needs dismissed. You see it not through a therapist's lens, but through the red gaze of a soul that has had enough. Do not run from this anger. It is not toxic. It is sacred. It is the fire that burns the codependent cords. It is the voice that says, no, more. It is the archetype of the warrior rising in the empath for the first time. And it is terrifying for someone who has built their identity around peacekeeping. The emergence of boundaries feels like violence, but it is not violence. It is protection. And protection is not cruelty. It is self-love in its most primal form. Here the empath meets the shadow. For years, they have disowned their anger, disowned their selfishness, disowned the part of them that wanted hung. These qualities were buried, projected onto others, shamed. But now, as they stop pleasing everyone, the shadow returns, not to punish, but to integrate. The shadow says, I am your unmet need. I am your silent scream. I am your stolen boundaries, and I have been waiting for you. Do not fear the shadow. Fear the life you lived without it. You see, we cannot be whole without reclaiming the pieces we've disowned. And the empath's journey is not just of compassion.